I had returned to my old cabin, expecting the familiar peace of towering pines, frost-tipped firewood, and the quiet hum of morning. But that calm shattered the instant a woman appeared at the gate, claiming she and her HOA had authority over my land. My heart skipped as she demanded I leave a place I've called home for decades. Who could imagine that a simple property could ignite such a battle? Threats, staged inspections, and even drones followed. And yet, armed only with patience, careful documentation, and the law on my side, I stood my ground. This isn't just a story about a cabin. It's a fight for rights, dignity, and justice. You won't believe what happened next. I thought it was just another quiet morning at the cabin. The kind of morning where the frost laces the woodpile like delicate lace, and the air smells of damp pine and earth. I could hear the faint creak of the old gate swinging in the wind, my father's toolbox resting where I had left it, the blue enamel kettle perched on the rail, catching the first pale light of dawn. Everything seemed exactly as it should be, familiar and comforting, a small pocket of the world where order and peace had always been mine. And yet, in that fragile calm, a presence arrived that immediately disturbed the rhythm I had come to trust. I noticed them before they even spoke. Two figures, jackets stiff with some hastily adopted symbol of authority, stepping over the frost as though it belonged to them. One held a clipboard with a sense of gravity that felt forced. The other filmed with a phone, recording what they seemed to believe was evidence of my wrongdoing. They claimed to represent the HOA, citing rules, codes, and community oversight, words strung together in a way that sounded impressive from a distance but crumbled under scrutiny. And there I was, standing on my own porch, blinking, asking quietly but firmly, "Who gave you the right to cross this threshold? Which law grants a neighborhood committee dominion over land I have inherited, lived on, and cared for?" Their answer was a shrug of authority, an insistence on consistency and community review, delivered with the confidence of people convinced their paper and emblem carried more weight than common sense or law. I felt a heat climb my spine, not of anger but of disbelief. How could someone step onto what was mine, assess my life, and think it within their power to judge it? And yet I did not move rashly. I did not shout. I observed, questioned, and let their own uncertainty reveal itself in trembling hands and furtive glances. Every inch of that porch, every familiar object became a statement of presence. Stacked firewood, neat. Toolbox intact. Kettle, unoffending, and yet profoundly symbolic of boundaries I had no intention of surrendering. It was a moment that crystallized the absurdity of power claimed without authority, a tension between assumed control and rightful ownership. I realized then that the morning was no longer quiet, and that this intrusion would test not just my patience, but my resolve, my ability to assert calm certainty in the face of chaos. And in that pause, I understood something vital. The story was beginning, and every choice I made from this point forward would be the difference between submission and reclamation of what was unquestionably mine. The first confrontation unfolded like a test I had not expected, a trial of patience and perception disguised as an ordinary morning. The agents stepped onto the property with deliberate slowness, their boots crunching on the frost as though each sound carried authority. One had a clipboard, papers stacked neatly, edges crisp and precise, while the other filmed, phone raised, capturing every movement I made. They read from their notices with a practiced cadence, citing vague rules about noise, storage, and community character, as if these words alone were enough to bend reality to their will. I oversaw them, noticing the slight tremor in the hands that held the clipboard, the way the filmer's eyes darted constantly, betraying a nervousness beneath the show of confidence. How can someone claim power over another's life simply because they wore matching jackets with a logo that looked official from a distance? I wondered. I stepped forward calmly, my voice measured, posing questions they had no answer for. Who signed these papers? Which law permits a neighborhood board to enforce compliance on land outside its jurisdiction? Each question hung in the air, a mirror reflecting the hollowness of their assumed authority. Their eyes flicked to one another, hesitation creeping into movements that had been choreographed to impress. I could see the falter in their posture, the subtle shift in stance, the way their breathing betrayed their uncertainty. This was not just about rules on paper. It was about presence, ownership, and the invisible line between fear and respect. Every object around me, the stacked firewood, each log aligned as if marking territory, the metal toolbox my father had left behind, and even the simple enamel kettle became markers of my existence, evidence that my life and property were neither abstract nor negotiable. I reached for my phone, documenting the notices, the logos, and their gestures. I photographed the papers and recorded the footage, not for dramatics, but to create a factual record of events unfolding before me. Each frame captured the subtle cracks in their performance, the trembling fingers, the slight hesitation before issuing another vague demand, the furtive glances to see if I would comply without question. It became clear that authority, when unbacked by law, is fragile, and in that fragility, power can shift. I reminded myself of this silently, letting it anchor me as I stood on the threshold of my own property, unyielding yet composed. The tension hung thick, yet I did not raise my voice or move aggressively. I let the contrast between their manufactured authority and my quiet assurance speak louder than any words. The agents, initially intent on intimidation, faltered under the weight of their own inconsistency. At the same time, I remained grounded, observing and responding rather than reacting. In this quiet assertion, there was a strange empowerment, a sense of clarity that only comes when one recognizes that control is not given. It is maintained by the one willing to claim it calmly, with reason and evidence. Every photograph, every video clip, every recorded question became not just documentation, but a shield, a testament to the careful balance between standing firm and staying composed, between confronting false authority and maintaining personal integrity. By the time the first encounter concluded, I understood that the day's events were only the beginning. This initial clash was not a threat to be feared, but a signal, a moment that defined the rules of engagement. It revealed the importance of presence, preparation, and calm decisiveness, showing that even the most confident claims of power can crumble when met with unshakable resolve and meticulous observation. I stepped back, phone in hand, mind focused, ready for what would come next, fully aware that authority untested often collapses under the weight of reality, and that every action I took now would set the tone for the battles ahead. When they returned, it was not just the two agents this time. A gray SUV rolled up, accompanied by a white pickup carrying folding tables, cones, and a banner tightly rolled with bungees, as if preparing for some elaborate performance. The scene was surreal, neighbors milling about, their expressions carefully neutral but betraying curiosity and mild judgment. At the same time, the HOA orchestrated what they called a community inspection. I stood on the porch, taking it in, noticing how the props and banners seemed designed more for spectacle than substance. Was this authority or theater? And why did they think staging a parade of compliance could override reality itself? The agents, the clipboard man, and the filmer now had a small entourage, a supporting cast for their performance. They pointed at my neatly stacked firewood, my father's toolbox, the small garden tools leaning against the cabin, and even the rail where the blue kettle sat. Each object became evidence of some imagined violation, a visual offense to the neighborhood aesthetic. I couldn't help but notice the absurdity, a feeling mingled with a rising tension. How far would they go? Could a small group of people really impose their vision over law and property rights? The unpredictability of it made every movement, every gesture, a question mark hanging in the air. Then the skid steer appeared, its engine low and ominous, a symbol of escalation. I watched as it nudged closer to the woodpile, an attempt to assert control physically. Meanwhile, neighbors whispered, some nodding to the HOA, adding a subtle pressure that sought to isolate me. I felt the weight of expectations and judgments, both real and imagined, and yet I remained calm. I documented everything with my phone, noting skid steer movements, the gestures of the agents, and the positioning of the banners. Every image, every video clip became part of a record, an anchor against the chaos swirling around me. The blazer-clad woman orchestrating this pseudo-inspection handed me laminated sheets she called community resolutions, listing demands without legal backing, citing non-existent statutes, and presenting signatures that belonged to no recognized authority. I scanned them, noting the absence of any official seal or county validation. My mind remained alert, assessing, questioning. How do you dismantle the illusion of authority without escalating conflict unnecessarily? The answer was methodical observation, precise recording, and calm verbal assertion of rights. I called the county line, speakerphone on, letting the dispatcher hear the chaos firsthand. The recognition in their voice, the instructions to document and await deputy arrival, provided both validation and strategy. As the HOA continued their staged theatrics, I noticed the stark contrast between their frantic, over-constructed performance and my composed presence. Where they relied on props, noise, and intimidation, I relied on clarity, law, and documentation. Each staged maneuver they attempted, raising cones, positioning banners, nudging the skid steer, was met with calm resistance. I asked questions aloud, noting details, pointing out gaps in their claims, exposing the weakness of authority that was all show and no substance. The psychological shift was subtle but powerful. Tension grew on their side, while my certainty became increasingly apparent. By mid-morning, it was clear the illusion could not hold. The props, the banners, and the assembled neighbors were all theatrical devices meant to mask the absence of proper authority. And in this realization, I found empowerment, understanding that preparation, observation, and methodical response could transform fear into control. The morning stretched on, each interaction a careful balance between assertiveness and patience, a test of endurance and strategy. And through it all, one question lingered in my mind. How far would they go before reality? The law, documentation, and reason intervened. Night fell with a weight that made every shadow seem heavier, every sound sharper. I had just settled in for the evening when I noticed the faint hum of an engine in the distance, too deliberate to be random. A low, methodical drone of movement threaded through the darkness, accompanied by soft, careful footsteps that seemed measured to avoid detection, but impossible to ignore. My heart raced, not out of panic, but alert anticipation. Who could be here at this hour, and why? Was this another performance from the HOA or something more insidious? I asked myself quietly, knowing that clarity and calm would be the only tools to navigate what was coming. I moved deliberately, phone in hand, recording the flickering shadows and glints of reflective surfaces that hinted at human presence. Two figures emerged, carrying tools that glinted under the moonlight, and a small drone hovered above, buzzing with an almost mechanical persistence. Their approach was cautious, deliberate, but unmistakably intrusive. I kept my distance, noting every movement, every shadowy gesture, documenting the sequence as meticulously as possible. Signs warning no inspection without a warrant were posted in visible locations. Cameras were angled to capture the driveway and perimeter, and logs were started in my notebook to detail times, actions, and potential identifiers. Every step I took was calculated, not to escalate confrontation, but to establish a record of accountability. The tension was electric, heightened by the nighttime setting. Every snap of a twig, every whir of the drone blades kept me on edge while forcing me to sharpen my focus. I called the county dispatcher, speakerphone on, letting them hear the low hums, the subtle movements, the precise cadence of intrusion. Their calm, authoritative voice on the line was grounding. They confirmed what I already suspected. My vigilance was justified, my documentation essential. Knowing someone with authority was monitoring and validating the situation shifted the balance, transforming fear into purposeful action. I could act with patience, knowing that the law, if not yet physically present, was watching. As the intruders circled the cabin, testing fences and peering at windows, the uncertainty hung thick in the air. Would they attempt to breach the gate? Could they manipulate or damage property before anyone arrived? Each near miss amplified the suspense, the kind that keeps a mind acutely aware, senses sharp, every instinct alive. The drone's buzz above punctuated each calculated step, a reminder of the thin line between observation and intrusion. And yet, amidst the heightened anxiety, I found a calm resolve. Every action, posting signs, photographing the scene, logging details, was a form of control, a counterweight to the invisible threat that stalked the night. By the time the night stretched toward its deepest hour, the figures retreated, leaving behind only the echo of engines and the faint, artificial glow of the drone's failed flight. The tension eased, replaced by reflection. This encounter was a stark lesson in preparedness, observation, and measured response. Fear had been present, yes, but it was managed, recorded, and transformed into a tool for empowerment. In the darkness, I understood that vigilance was not just a reaction, it was a strategy. And strategy, coupled with authority validation, created an unshakable foundation for navigating even the most unpredictable threats. The next morning, I woke to a scene that felt unreal, as if the previous day's intrusions had evolved into a full-scale spectacle. Across the small clearing, banners flapped in the wind. Their bold letters proclaiming neighborhood standards fair, a podium set up with a megaphone balanced precariously atop it, and volunteers handing out flyers that bore my name alongside warnings about safety and compliance. The sheer audacity of it was staggering. How could anyone believe that theatrical displays could substitute for law or documentation? And yet, there it all was, staged meticulously to intimidate, confuse, and coerce. I paused, letting the absurdity sink in, knowing that every detail mattered, every prop a deliberate attempt to fabricate authority where none existed. I didn't panic. Instead, I moved with clarity, calling fire prevention, the utility company, and local deputies. Each line connected me to a voice that carried absolute authority, a grounding in law and fact that these staged threats could never claim. The dispatcher at fire prevention listened as I detailed foreign fuel placed dangerously close to structures, a small chipper exhaust positioned to ignite, and bundles of straw clearly staged to simulate a hazard. The utility company confirmed that no orders or permits had been issued for disconnects. At the same time, deputies documented my reports and advised me to remain on the property. The juxtaposition of false authority outside my gates against legitimate officials validating my concerns created a psychological shift, empowerment replacing dread, preparation replacing fear. As I observed the HOA's orchestrated activities, the full extent of their fabrication became clear. The skid steer, which had appeared on the periphery, moved close to the cabin, nudging debris that had been intentionally arranged to seem dangerous. Flyers were distributed with selective warnings, aiming to paint compliance as a moral obligation. Laminated sheets claimed non-existent violations with fake signatures and dates but lacked any legal foundation. The blazer-clad orchestrator, attempting to manage the crowd and maintain her illusion of power, presented documents as if they could transform spectacle into authority. Every gesture, every prop, every staged hazard was designed to intimidate. Yet I saw through the design, recognizing each element for what it was, a performance carefully arranged, but fundamentally powerless against preparation and truth. Tension mounted as the multiple threats converged simultaneously. The skid steer in motion, the crowd of neighbors, banners fluttering, and a small team of agents attempting to assert control, all occurring while I maintained distance and communication with authorities. I recorded every detail, noting each movement of the machinery, the placement of hazards, and the distribution of flyers. My calm contrasted sharply with the chaos around me as each measured step, phone call, and photograph reinforced my position. The psychological weight shifted visibly. Some neighbors hesitated, glancing between the actors and me, sensing the fragility of the HOA's manufactured authority. The contrast between spectacle and legitimate law was palpable, and it amplified my sense of control. When the authorities arrived, the scene shifted decisively. Fire prevention personnel assessed the staged hazards, identifying them as not legitimate mitigation, but theatrical props, photographs of contrived danger, and misapplied safety concerns. Utility supervisors verified that no valid disconnects or service orders existed. At the same time, deputies documented the scene meticulously, reinforcing the boundaries I had established. The agents and their staged crowd were now confronted with professionals whose authority was tangible and grounded in law, dismantling the illusion piece by piece. In real time, the performance collapsed under scrutiny. The banners and flyers rendered impotent against fact and procedure. In that high-tension moment, I felt the profound impact of strategy, patience, and methodical action. Where intimidation and spectacle had attempted to create fear, clarity, documentation, and credible authority transformed the scene into a demonstration of justice. The props, the banners, and even the skid steer became markers not of power but of hubris, collapsing when faced with real oversight. I could sense the energy shift. A subtle acknowledgement from those orchestrating the events that the rules they attempted to bend could not hold against evidence and law. By the time the day's confrontation reached its peak, the chaos had been replaced with order. The authorities left clear instructions and warnings to the HOA, reinforcing my rights and providing both immediate protection and long-term validation. I stepped back, surveying the scene. The banners flapped limply, flyers lay untouched on the ground, and the skid steer was idle, its operator aware of the limits imposed by actual authority. I understood then that the fight had been as much about perception and control as about law itself, and that methodical preparation, calm resolve, and reliance on legitimate authority were the tools that had transformed potential disaster into empowerment and justice. The courthouse felt impossibly still, the weight of anticipation pressing against the walls as I stepped into the room. I could sense the tension, not just in myself, but in everyone present. The HOA's lawyer attempted to summon drama, presenting photographs and accounts as if repetition and volume could substitute for legality. They spoke of neighborhood character, compliance, and community standards, each claim carefully crafted to intimidate and overwhelm. But I had prepared for this moment for weeks, months even, and their theatrics held no power against documented reality. Could a performance, no matter how loud, withstand scrutiny when truth was laid bare? I presented the evidence methodically. Photos of staged hazards, drone footage of attempted intrusion, utility reports confirming no legitimate orders for disconnects, and detailed logs documenting every interaction. Each piece of evidence was a testament to careful observation, patience, and unwavering calm. I recounted the incidents, not with anger or theatrics, but with precision, letting the documentation speak louder than any emotional appeal. Every stack of firewood, every flyer, every skid steer maneuver that had seemed threatening in the moment became a clear demonstration of deception. The judge listened, attentive, pausing occasionally to examine the records and reports that left no room for misinterpretation. The courtroom became a study in contrast. False authority on one side, its veneer stripped away under scrutiny, versus meticulous preparation law and documented truth on the other. The blazer-clad orchestrator of the HOA's campaigns attempted to intervene, but her words faltered when confronted with verified facts. The drone footage alone, showing attempts to film private property without consent, carried undeniable weight. Utility reports confirmed tampering, disproving claims of compliance or emergency necessity. Every theatrical element that had been used to intimidate was rendered powerless by evidence, authority, and reason. I realized then the profound impact of preparation, the difference between chaos and control, between intimidation and empowerment. Finally, the judge delivered the ruling. The protective order was granted, explicitly barring the HOA and its agents from entering the property, touching gates, or staging events on the road. Restitution was ordered for tampering with utility equipment, and the misuse of documents and staged hazards was officially recognized. The tension that had coiled in my chest for days released in a quiet, profound wave. Validation was not just about winning a case. It was about the affirmation of rights, the triumph of law over spectacle, and the power of methodical, calm action in the face of intimidation. Walking out of the courthouse, the sense of relief was accompanied by reflection. Every photograph, every call to authorities, every careful log had mattered. The story that had begun on a quiet porch, with frost on firewood and a kettle catching the morning light, had reached its resolution. The HOA's power, based on assumption and theatrics, had crumbled, replaced by law, reason, and truth. It was a reminder that standing firm, Documenting carefully and trusting in legitimate authority transforms chaos into justice. The struggle had been exhausting, but the outcome was absolute. Property, rights, and peace restored. A quiet triumph that spoke louder than any banner or megaphone ever could. The cabin was quiet again, the weight of confrontation replaced by the steady rhythm of daily life. I walked around the property, repairing the rail damaged during the staged threats, securing locks, and adjusting cameras to ensure the boundaries were clear. Every action carried a sense of finality, a reclaiming not just of space but of agency. I documented each measure meticulously, knowing that preparation had been as crucial to victory as the law itself. How often do we underestimate the power of calm vigilance, assuming chaos must be met with haste rather than strategy? Neighbors, once hesitant, now offered quiet nods and small gestures of acknowledgement. Their presence was subtle but meaningful, a reminder that community is not built on authority alone, but on respect and understanding. The yard, once disturbed by intrusion and staged hazards, was restored to order, the firewood stacked neatly, tools returned to their rightful place, and the kettle on its rail catching the morning light like a small emblem of resilience. Peace was not imposed. It had been earned through patience, documentation, and measured response. As I stood back, observing the restored cabin and the calm surrounding woods, reflection came naturally. The ordeal had been exhausting, fraught with tension. Still, it underscored a timeless lesson. Standing firm in the face of intimidation, documenting carefully, and trusting in legitimate authority transforms fear into empowerment. This is not about defiance for its own sake, but about reclaiming space, asserting rights, and navigating conflict with clarity and integrity. Every photograph, every call to the authorities, every careful record mattered. The property, the peace, and my sense of agency had been restored, a quiet triumph that reaffirmed a universal truth. Vigilance, preparation, and calm resolve are the foundations of absolute security, and resilience in the face of false power leaves a legacy far stronger than any banner or threat ever could.